Right to Reason podcast. I am your host, Robert Stanley. Today, we are talking to the author of The Ebony Project, Why Some Black Women Are Walking Out on Religion, and others should too, and also another book on death, dying, and disbelief. That just came out. I asked her about the secular meaning of death and about the recent court case of Kyle Rittenhouse. This conversation meant a lot to me, and I'm grateful to share it. Here we go.
And I'm feeling good.
It's the Right to Reason podcast.
The 18-year-old burst into tears and then dropped to his chair immediately following today's verdict. Rittenhouse also hugging his attorney.
What did you make of the President of the United States calling you a white supremacist?
Mr. President, if I could say one thing to you, I would urge you to go back and watch the trial and understand the facts before you make a statement.
That's not a small thing to be called that.
No, it's actual malice, defaming my character for him to say something like that.
If, when I'm dead, I am as if I never had been, then that's the way I was before I was born. Because just as if I try to go back behind my eyes and find what is there, I come to a blank. If I try to remember back and back and back and back, I've got my earliest memories. And then behind them, nothing. Total blank.
Hi, this is Candace, author of the newly released On Death, Dying, and Disbelief, and you are listening to the Right to Reason podcast.
This episode of the Right to Reason podcast is brought to you by our patrons and contributors like me. We have all recognized the value of the unrestrained marketplace of ideas and have decided to make a difference. You can make a difference too. Contribute at patreon.com/right and learn more about your right to reason at therighttoreason.com. Your activism is appreciated.
Candace R.M. Gorham, you have a lot of letters after your name. LCMHCS. What does all that stand for? That's like half the alphabet.
Right. Licensed Clinical Mental Health Counselor Supervisor.
Wow. Okay. So you tell the counselors what to do.
Yes, exactly.
Do they make for bad employees? I would think they would be difficult, and not necessarily maybe like yours in particular, but just people in the mental health profession just don't seem like they would be easy to control or manage. Is that crazy to say that?
No. I think you're probably on to something because everybody thinks they're professional about everybody else's lives.
Yeah, that's funny. As a licensed professional counselor, she is the author of the Ebony Exodus Project and is on the advisory council of the Black Humanist Alliance of the American Humanist Association. She lives in North Carolina. Candace, it's so good to have you here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Why do we say that? Why do we say good to have you? It's like an old cliche thing, isn't it? Because
good to have
it's like you're on my news broadcast, like you're sitting in a chair across from me, but everybody says it that way. Like if I go on another show, I'll be like, happy to be here.
Yeah, exactly.
Really makes no sense. It's like saying roll down the window. We still say it.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not rolling.
What's the Ebony Exodus Project about?
So the Ebony Exodus Project was my first book. And it was about the subtitle is Why Some Black Women Are Walking Out on Religion and Others Should Too. So it's basically a study of, a survey of like American life for Black women, right? Like issues and statistics and science and all the information about like our physical health, our mental health, or, our financial health, all of those various like topics of like measures of standard of living, right? So I discussed those, but then interspersed in those chapters about the research which is the meat of the book, which is their stories from women that I collected for over about a year and some change, interviews that I did. And it's just these stories of 10 different Black women and their religious experience and like why they left religion and what it's like for them now as free thinkers and atheist non-believers. So that's what that first book, the Ebony Exodus Project, is about.
Fascinating. And you just wrote another one on death, dying, and disbelief. You don't do the easy topics, do you?
No, well, no, it's from lived experience though. So
You lost someone close to you?
yes, so that's what kickstarted me to write the book. Was it had been over just about a year since I had lost my high school sweetheart died in a car accident, and and like we had reconnected, we both married, had kids, divorced, and we reconnected, and so it was a significant blow. It wasn't like 30 years ago when I was in high school blow. It was like today blow,
right?
And it was just really devastating. It was really a hard year for me, and so I thought I was doing better, and around that 1 year mark, the grief just really came back and really overwhelmed me, and I thought I need some way to deal with this. And just as a mental health counselor, I was like, well, I thought that writing a book would help. And I thought, how can I get this out? I'm a counselor. What can I do? And so the product of the book is 10 tips on things that we as non-believers can do to help us deal with the grieving process. Because if you think about it, death and mourning and grief and all of that is often sort of like relegated to the realm of the religious, the spiritual, right? Like we think about afterlife, heaven, hell, all of that stuff, angels. And so for those of us who are, being in America, being in the United States especially, right? Like a lot of times if people die, all the dialogue, all the conversation, everything is very spiritually centered. And so what do we as non-believers do? What resources do we have? And we don't have any resources,
right.
People haven't been writing these types of books and studying this type of stuff. They don't teach this in counseling school, like how to work with a person who does not have a religious or a spiritual framework, how to help them deal with their grief. And so it's 10 tips about things that are sort of geared towards things that non-believers can do to try to take care of ourselves.
Would you say it's ignorance is bliss when it comes to the topic of death or losing someone close to you? I felt so much what you just said, where you said we don't really have any of these tools available to us. I don't know. I know my dad just had surgery, and my mom sent me a picture of him. He had his hip replaced. And he's like 70 years old now. And she sent me a picture of him sleeping in his hospital bed. And it hit me. Like, it hit me real hard. That looks like a dead person, because we always see the eyes closed in the hospital bed. That's the last thing you see of a person typically before the funeral, And not that my mother's death won't hurt as well. I know it will, but something, I don't know. I just know my dad's passing is going to rock me, like, hard.
Yeah.
And I think because I got to see him, I say I got to, like it was a good thing. I saw him when he lost his father, and it changed him. And I guess that's just what happens to all of us when your parents pass. But I remember him picking up the phone. It was like either real early in the morning, or real late at night or whatever. But I remember the phone woke me up. And he picked it up, and I just heard him start going, no, no, no. And I walk in the room like, what's going on? And he's just saying no over and over, like uncontrollably. And then he drops the phone and he picks it up. It was one of those cordless ones. Remember those big old clunky ones we used to have? And it didn't have the metal antenna coming out of it, but it wasn't that old. Antenna. But he picked it up and had it upside down. And didn't even realize it was upside down, and just started talking. And I mean, he was just completely disoriented. Man, that one hit him. That hit him for a long time. But anyway, I'm rambling. It's just it's such a powerful topic altogether, and I don't know how I'm going to process it. But to the original question, would you say we're at a major disadvantage?
So, yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, I do. I think that we as atheists are at a disadvantage in the sense that we don't have that sort of built-in positive message. Believers who believe in like a heaven or like some version of a positive afterlife, they have a sort of a positive thing to hang on to. And so while we may both be grieving the same thing, they have sort of like a little ray of sunshine in their pocket that we don't have.
Yeah. They're going to see him again one day.
Yeah.
And that's
exactly.
gotta be so helpful. Then again, it's almost like maybe we are at an advantage because we actually get to grieve? Is it possible like they never really say goodbye?
Well, that was going to be the flip side of what I was going to say.
If I had to cut you off. Sorry.
Which is that, are you okay? What I was going to say, the second half of that is, right, like I think in the long run, on the bigger scale, I think that if we can deal with our grief and successfully resolve the grief, then that we are at the better advantage, because then we are able to, we understand the importance of really living here and now and appreciating the here and now and what we have, and, and learning to value the people around us as well. So our ability to make meaning out of the here and now is deepened,
right? Because
that's all we got,
Yeah, I'm such a good interviewer. I asked you a question and then answered it. That's hilarious.
You're okay. It's funny.
I feel like religion has kind of monopolized so much. Like they've got, like if you go to a funeral, you're going to hear their music. You're going to hear a sermon, most likely. Somebody's going to read out of Corinthians, It's like we don't really have a whole lot of space that we can fill that's available to us in that area. Like we don't have a whole lot of opportunity to lose someone without having to experience it through the filter that the religious people require, because there's going to be somebody in your family, or grandma or something, they have to have the religious part of the ceremony, and we just kind of have to sit there and put up with it when we know
endure
it.
Yeah. I think that is the experience of a lot of grieving, atheists and non-believers, is that they feel really, the process is especially lonely to us because we don't have that additional built-in network. Like you said, it's not easy. It's not gonna be easy for me to go to grandma because grandma gonna want to talk about how they're in heaven and pray for me, and it's not easy for me to go talk to this person because this person is 9 times out of 10 gonna tell me they're in heaven and to just pray for, and so it's like we don't have that same amount of support just by virtue of the fact that we're often, one of the only, if the only, non-believer or atheist in our family, unless we have an extended peer network that maybe we have some other people we can go to and get support from.
Right.
But I do think it's an exceptionally lonely process, and a lot of grieving atheists that I've talked to over the years who were grieving and who were mourning or reflecting on their, past grief or whatever, all talked about that same thing about being lonely in the process, about being irritated in the process because you got to endure people talking about they're in heaven, or, it just being a very frustrating process because of constantly being exposed to the religious aspects or the spiritual aspects of grief.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with that. I feel like I just have to lie or play the part because I got to be the bigger person or something. So if I'm in that scenario, like when my grandmother passed, I had just lost my faith. I was kind of more in like the stage, I always call it losing the fear of the Lord, because once you aren't scared of him anymore, like it's like he loses that power over you where you can start being skeptical about what you read in the Bible or the hymns you're singing, and then eventually, you lose your faith altogether. And I was kind of right in that transitional stage where I was still angry. You know what I mean? Like you wasted so much of your life to this thing. And, and my grandmother passed away. And I remember just being at that funeral, like, and people talking to me about how we're going to see her again and trying to make me feel better. But the whole time they're saying just crazy bullshit, is what I'm thinking in my head. Like, I know that's not real, and I remember just smiling and kind of agreeing, while you got one hand over top of the other hand, that kind of thing, and just nodding like, yeah, I can't wait to see her again as well. And, would you say that's probably just what we have to do? Or do you just in the middle of that funeral moment, are you just like, no, she's not coming back, folks. She's just gone.
I actually have an entire chapter where I talk about just that thing,
really?
Right? Where I talk about I think the tip, it says something like, be patient with your spiritual loved ones. And, when you're grieving and when you're in mourning, like you don't, your resources are very limited. You're exhausted and compromised and all that by the grief itself, that you don't have the energy necessarily to fight some unnecessary battles. And so I talk about just that thing of, don't spend your energy trying to argue with a believer about whether or not that loved one is in heaven. You're not going to get anywhere in this moment. So why spend your energy on that?
Right.
And definitely not like letting yourself get angry or triggered, like you're spinning your wheels, because this, the other half of the argument that I make in that particular chapter is that, they're grieving too. Their grief process has to play out the way it plays out. And their beliefs about the afterlife are part of what's holding them together right now. Like in this extremely most vulnerable time, I don't want to take away anybody's coping skills. I don't, unless they're like severely unhealthy, like, you drinking yourself to pass out every night. But just if your coping skill is, I believe in an afterlife, I'm not going to try to take that from you right now.
Right.
We can talk about this at another time. So I absolutely believe, if somebody says to you, oh, they're in heaven or whatever, you can smile, nod, whatever, don't necessarily mean you got to co-sign on it and say, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I do believe she's in heaven. Somebody say that, you just do the same old thing like we do in all the other scenarios. When
like at work.
Exactly. You just kind of nod your head and let it go in one ear and out the next ear. But the point is, like, don't expend your energy on that sort of thing, because you don't really have the energy for that anyway. And just let that kind of stuff go.
Are you afraid to die yourself?
I don't think it's necessarily that I'm afraid to die, but I feel anxiety about my own death because of people who would be surviving me.
Right.
That's what I think about. I think about my daughter, trying to survive me, or like, what if I were to die before my mom, like her trying to endure it. So it's not so much that I fear death, because I believe that once my brain turns off, it's off, and that's it. There's no more. End of story.
I'm with you there. I just like, of course, I feel those same things that you're saying. My kids, or my wife, or they're all gonna miss me, and that'll be really sad. Yeah. Of course, but the not existing thing, you atheists that are on that end. Like, there's the ones that are like on my end. I think we're maybe more real about it. Take it with a grain of salt, but you know what I mean. When I hear you guys say, it'll be just like before I was born, that kind of thing. I'm not worried about being dead. I'm not going to know about it because I won't be there to know I'm dead. I can't do that. Like, I am terrified on like an existential level of not existing. Maybe it's not so much that it's not like you're not being honest with yourself. Maybe it's just I haven't got to that level yet that you're at. You found peace with it in a way. I don't know. Is it just an intellectual thing, or is there like something? I don't want to use the word spiritual, but I can't think of a better. You know what I mean? On like a spiritual level, like the way that we would mean as atheists, at least a deep sense of something. Mm-hmm. Is that where you're at, or is it like you just rationalize it?
Yeah, no, I think once upon a time, I completely understand your sentiment, and I would say I've been there before for sure. Mm-hmm. I've had my periods of time where like you said, there's a deep dread about not existing anymore, like not being here anymore, or dread about like, oh my God, what's my death gonna be like? Is it gonna be painful? Like, I don't want to die painfully. Oh my goodness, like think about stuff like that. But I think now, I got to a place where, it took some time. It took time. It was not just a light switch on and off sort of thing, whereas now it is more of like a rational thing. And, it's more of I'm just sort of thinking through the thing and letting my, trying to be like Vulcan-esque logic about this thing,
mm-hmm.
Like this is what it is. And there's no need for you to freak out about it. But now stuff like how I'm gonna die, I have like nightmares and ways that I could die. Like I have issues around death, but like to say, am I afraid of death itself? I think I'm not ready to die.
Right.
I'll say that.
You got shit to do.
Die. Yeah. So the thought of, say, going out right now, going to the grocery store, getting a car accident and die, like that is that's a little bit scary to me, because I'm not ready to die. I'm not ready to die yet. I got plenty that I still have to live for and that I want to do with my life. But I think that once I get older and I feel like I've done more, like I could see myself getting to a place where I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go now. Any day now, I'm good. I'm satisfied.
Yeah, isn't that weird? Real old folks seem to all get there. And I wonder if it's like, I wonder if it's legit or if it's just at that point you have to, where like if you get a real bad disease, you get, I don't know, what's a bad one? A cancer
or something.
Yeah. And I think everybody goes, at least what I've seen, they go through that fear stage and then they almost become the strong one in the room for everybody else. And it's like, well, I guess they do that because they have to, because, their courage takes over at some point. But maybe that's just what old people do. You might have one more summer left on this planet, if you're lucky. And at that point, maybe your brain switches into survival mode and you go, I'm looking forward to the end. I'm tired.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What's interesting you say that is another thing that I have in the book is I reference a Robert Frost poem. It's called After Apple Picking. It's basically like an old person reflecting on the fact that they've lived a good life and they're ready to die now.
I'll have to check that out. Or you know what? I'll throw that in the show notes for everybody. Also in the show notes, you can find both of Candace's books, On Death, Dying, and Disbelief. And also the Ebony Exodus Project. Both of those are in the show notes. I didn't say that earlier. I meant to. On that other book, can I pick your brain just for a second? Everything with Kyle Rittenhouse is really blowing up right now after he was found not guilty. And I hear a lot of people saying, well, this isn't a race issue. It was a white guy shooting white guys. And I get that, like, in the sense of, okay, it wasn't one race shooting another race. That's fair. And let's not just make it like that him shooting Rosenbaum and the others, that was him being a white supremacist. I mean, he probably is. I don't know. But I'm just saying, like, it's like they're leaving out the fact that it was him showing up to a Black Lives Matter protest, like, turned into a riot. The whole thing is politicized, and I feel like it is race-based. But what's your take on the whole trial and that idea that this has nothing to do with race?
Yeah, I think if you say it has nothing to do with race, then you're taking it out of the full context. Just like you said, it was a Black Lives Matter, rally initially, right? And the idea is that he didn't just shoot white people; he shot white allies of Black people.
Right.
Right. And so how often have we heard, stories of, or maybe with our own ears, a white person call another white person a nigger lover. That's a bad thing to be a white person who is an ally of Black people. You shouldn't be. You're a race betrayer. So the fact that he shot some white people, that's still just as bad, because these are people who are allied with Black people who he didn't seem to care very much about.
It's like every job I've ever been at, and it's been mostly like manufacturing, machine shop kind of jobs. You know what I mean? I've always worked in quality, so you just kind of move around to different production facilities, building your quality resume, as you go. And so it's you get a mixture. You get the academics, in the office, and then you also get like the blue collar guys, and you kind of got to play both sides with everybody with that. And every job I've been at, if anybody ever makes like a joke about gay people, which, I'm not opposed to jokes. You could, in my opinion, you might not agree, but I don't care if you're joking about race or sexuality or whatever, a joke's a joke. But at some point there's a pattern or something. And then every time I've said something like, well, that's not actually true about homosexuals or the LGBTQ community or what. They'll compare it to pedophilia or something like that. And it's just like, where you're like, hold on. Do you know? And I say so every freaking time, Candace, they go, oh, well, you're just gay then. You get called the thing that you defend. And I think maybe that it's not like people call white people Black but maybe like you said, if you're an ally, you kind of get painted with that same brush.
Yeah, no, I think that's, part of the problem. It's the context. You got to keep it in the like social context, that what's going on right now, what's the environment, what's the scenario. It just happened to be some white folk that got shot.
Do you think he committed murder? Would you say, like legally speaking?
You know what? I know there's like a whole there's a whole debate about like what's the like legal discussion about the difference between like homicide and murder, and so I don't know. I have not paid that much attention to it to that degree, but I definitely think that whether it was intentional or not intentional, some not intentional, whatever the scenario, whatever. All is going on, the impact is what really matters at the end of the day, right? You killed 2 people and you were irresponsibly carrying a gun, and you went and took that gun to a social, a big event. Like there's so much that's wrong here that whether or not I intended to kill somebody or not.
Right. Whether it's like technically legally murder in that moment when you're being attacked, I don't know that I could make that claim, but the boy got exactly what he wanted. And this whole, he's just trying to help business. Why would he care about a J.C. Penney 30 minutes away from his house?
Yeah, exactly.
Why would anybody care about that?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's laughable. Like, it's just ridiculous. I heard
this is one of the businesses he was quote unquote protecting was like his dad's or something. I don't know if that's legit. That's one of those rumor mill things.
No, I hadn't heard that.
But maybe if that was the case, I don't know. There's just so much fake news out there on both sides. Honestly, I saw stuff you put on Tucker Carlson, and obviously you're going to hear a bunch of bullshit from the right. But then I've even seen stuff where the news would say, like it would show, what was it, Gage? I think Gage was the one that got his arm blown off or his bicep blown off. But where he says, as the news reporting it, and they're showing the court case, and he says, and that's when I put my hands up, and then they mute him and then go back to the reporter, and the reporter goes, and that's when Kyle Rittenhouse fired on Gage. And then they go back to Gage, and he's like crying and talking about another topic. And I'm like, hold on, I saw that. He said, I put my hands up, and then I pointed my gun at him, and then he fired. And it's like both sides are manipulating all of us, and they're doing it from a good place. I don't know if I could say the right side's from a good place. Yeah, I hate to just paint everybody conservative with a bad brush like that, but definitely, I know I can see where the folks on the left, at least the people supporting Black Lives Matter, are looking at this going, you're using the goodness of my heart against me with false news, to get me hyped up. Did they ever riot? Do you know? I didn't hear anything about that.
I haven't heard about it. You talking about since the decision?
I thought that shit was going to go crazy.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything either. I don't remember seeing anything that said that.
I almost wonder if that's what the media wants. Am I being a conspiracy theorist if I say that?
What they want, the media wants what? For there to be a riot?
Yeah, because then they get more news and they get more money from their advertising. And do you think that could be a thing where like they hype up certain stories to get more stories out of it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do believe that there's a certain amount of like potentially corporate influence in some arenas. I think you have some personalities, like you may have a Rachel Maddow or somebody like that who really takes their journalistic integrity seriously, and they're not going to be influenced by corporate expectations of blah blah blah. I believe you got some that could claim that no, I really stick to my guns on some stuff, and I think there are others who would take on a BS story or kind of misrepresent the facts to sort of lean it over here in this way. And I think that probably happens on both sides, right and left and center. Where that, like you said, cutting out the statement of I pulled my gun, like cutting that little bit out. For the left side, that makes the argument that Rittenhouse was out there just cutting up. That makes that argument even stronger, right? And
I wanna believe that. I want to think. I want him to be as vilified as possible because it's easier to process that. But then whenever you say something like, oh well, it was older men attacking a younger guy, a 17-year-old. I don't like hearing that. So I'll just kind of push that part out. Or if you say, well, the first guy he shot, Rosenbaum, apparently he was a sex offender. That's another one. I don't know if that's accurate, or if he was just accused or whatever. It's another one that I'm not positive on. But, I hear that. I don't want to process that from the liberal side. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
But then you show me a video of Kyle beating up a girl or him saying he's going to shoot some black guys coming out of a store. I like that. You know, I mean, I say I don't like it, but you know what I mean? Like, but it works with the narrative that I feel.
The narrative, exactly. It serves it perfectly.
In your profession with counseling and stuff, do you see any similarities between, or maybe correlations with right or left-leaning people? What was that study? I say it like it was one. I'm sure it was multiple. But you know, the one where like they were saying like conservatives, if they show them images of gross stuff like maggots and eating flesh and stuff like that inside of a wound, their pupils dilate or they sweat a little bit more or something like that. Like I remember seeing some study like that. They respond differently because of the size of their amygdala. Like, do you see any similarities with different psychoses or neuroses with conservatives as opposed to liberals?
No, I can't say that I see any correlations between, you know, right or left leaning and, like you said, you know, mental health diagnoses.
Yeah.
I would love to see those studies you're talking about. That would be really interesting.
I'll try to find it and send it to you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that, you know, all of those same issues can come out of both sides because, you know, you can go too far in any direction. You know, you can go too far. And so I think that I could be an extremely liberal person who's so liberal. Like I was thinking about this the other day. I remember reading an article that was like there are some feminists, there's a school of thought that all penetration is rape. So even if, you know, you're a husband and a wife and you're engaging in consensual sex, there's some school of feminist thought that all penetration is inherently violent, and maybe not all of it is is rape, but all of it is inherently violent because it's, you know, a traumatic experience to the vagina itself. And I'm like, that's left, that's to the left, but that's way left. You know what I'm saying? To be like all penetration is inherently aggressive and violent and abusive to the vagina. Like that's some way left leaning.
I guess there's like it's definitely aggression involved, but if you start calling it rape or violence, my concern is you really devalue those words. Yeah. You know, where like everybody was a Nazi.
Yeah.
My mother is the sweetest lady in the world, and she voted for Trump. And she didn't just vote for Trump. She wore the stupid fucking red hat and went to the Trump rallies. Oh, hell. But she is not about you. There is no way somebody can convince me that lady, if you met her, you'd fall in love with her. She is the sweetest old lady in the world. She's just got duped. That's the facts of it. She got conned by a con man. And I don't see it a whole lot differently than if, like my dad called me the other day and said that he almost got scammed. Somebody called and said that they were his one of his grandkids and that they were in jail and needed bail money. He ended up trying to get him the money, and then I think it was Western Union told him that's a phone scam. But he got duped. That doesn't make him stupid. He's one of the smart guys. Got a master's degree. He's a highly intelligent guy, but he's just, you know, he's an old man that got tricked. And that's kind of how I look at my mom. So like whenever everybody's saying, during this last election, if you vote Trump, you're a Nazi, you know, you're a fascist. If those words have real meaning that we're shitting all over if we just say, like, I get your passion, you know, and there were definitely some fascistic things going on during Trump's presidency for sure. What was that one? And what's the town where it was in Portland where he actually had like people show up without any military gear on, but like it was like all like just black hood crap, you know. It was like, I think it was Blackwater actually, agents that he had show up grabbing people, throwing them into vans. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah, I think that was when there were some riots in Portland, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's pretty spooky. That's I think if you call that fascism, you're hitting the nail on the head there. But you can't call my mom a fascist. Like, come on. I think whenever we start using those words to just try to express how strongly we feel about something, rather than having a sense of loyalty to what these words mean, their usage at least.
I understand what you're saying. Like sometimes we overuse a word so much that they lose their meaning, and then it's like, well, what word are we left with to actually describe the real thing? Because you're watering down the real meaning of the word.
I'm looking forward to reading this book. Anybody else that wants to check it out, it will be in the show notes. You know, I'll put both of them in there. The first one was the Ebony Exodus Project, Why Some Black Women Are Walking Out on Religion and Others Should Too. And the second one, On Death, Dying, and Disbelief. Candace Gorham, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and sharing these books with us. I look forward to reading them.
Thank you so much.
you to Candace. Thank you to Dave Blair at DaveBlairMusic.com. Thank you to Feedspot.com for promoting the Right to Reason to the Top 10 Atheist podcast. Thank you to our patrons, Rob Schreck, $10, Larry Wilson, 8, Michael Moore, 5, Catherine Class, 5, Free Thinker, 215 at 2, Phil Calderon at 2, our $1 patrons, Brittany Catherman, Alan Marks, Philip Spawn, Bernard Lamberell, Enema Man, and our top supporter, Rob Montgomery at $20. You can support this broadcast at patreon.com/right and learn more at therighttoreason.com. I'll talk to you again next week. Between now and then, fight for your right to reason.
Whiskey and soda and rock and roll.